如果你要进步你的中文，你必须要看这个视频，因为不管你是外国人或者中国人，我要介绍你我怎么学过中文。Hi everyone, my name is Josh. In this video, I'm going to be talking about the strategies that I used in order to improve in Mandarin Chinese. Mandarin Chinese is considered the hardest language to learn by many language experts, and for good reason, because there's about over 50,000 and plus Chinese characters out there, and it is very hard to memorize every single one of them. And it is a very difficult language for people who are used to alphabetized languages such as English, Spanish, French, and it can make the transition to learn that to characters can be very difficult. Oftentimes, people come across learning Mandarin for the first time and they feel like you're not getting anything. Perhaps that might be your experience, where you might be learning Mandarin and it seems like one thing's going in one ear and then you're forgetting it out the other ear. And you might be at a point where you're frustrated. Look no further because I am here to show you how I learned Mandarin for 4 years in high school. And I still retained and still am able to speak it to this day. 我们现在要看. So I'm essentially going to break down this video into a couple of key strategies right here. So I'm going to break it down into memorization, and I'm also going to break it down into application. And I have several tips to go over with each of those. So when it comes to memorization, when you first start off learning a language, yes, there is no other way around memorization. You do have to strictly memorize words in order to understand how to speak a language. However, that being said, there is a very smart way to go about it. What I would highly suggest you do is that when it comes to learning Mandarin, you need to look up frequently used vocab words in Mandarin, a Mandarin frequency vocab list. There are several of these lists out there on the internet. Most commonly, you can find them in Wikipedia and a couple of other Chinese teaching sites. These frequency lists will contain 1,000 of the most commonly used words and phrases in Mandarin Chinese. I would highly suggest that you base your studying and memorization off of these most commonly used 1,000 words. Because, for example, in the English language, we don't tend to use the word tornado quite a lot. That is very rarely used, only in certain situations like describing the weather. However, we would use the word the quite a lot more, and I've probably said it way too many times in this video. What I'm trying to say is in Mandarin Chinese, you need to learn words that are like the in English. So that way, you're able to understand commonly used words and phrases. Supposedly, there are 50,000 plus characters in the Chinese language. However, in order to read a newspaper and get about an 80% comprehension, you would need to understand only 2,000. That's crazy. And already 1,000 of those are the most common characters. So you just need to expand to another 1,000. And I know that sounds like a lot of characters. But once you memorize those first 1,000, memorizing the next 2,000, well, it's going to be a little easier because you already have a baseline. In my personal experience when it came to studying Mandarin, when I took Chinese 1 in high school, that was the most difficult year for me studying Mandarin because learning a language at the beginning is always going to be difficult. However, keep pursuing memorizing. With Chinese, you not only need to memorize how to say the word, but you should also memorize how to write it. So what I would do is I personally read out whiteboards. A lot of times right on the whiteboard. However, in Mandarin class, I had these specific sheets that my Chinese teacher would make me write. I hated doing those at the time, but looking back, it was actually really good for my memorization. Because what she would do, and I'm not sure if I could post one right here. Let's see if it pops up, put my hands up below so it could fit. These sheets, I forget the name of them, and somebody, please, in the comments section, I will pin this comment, whoever is able to describe what it is. Whoever can describe the exact name of this sheet will deserve a pin in the comment. Please, that would be a huge help. Anyway, I would use these sheets. So if I'm not mistaken, this sheet was a 10 by 10 sheet. It would be broken up where you could write 10 characters on top and then 10 characters going down. So it would have like about 100 squares. I hated doing those sheets because you had to fill every single one of those squares with characters. However, it was to my benefit because it really applies a saying, repetition is the mother of all learning. My Chinese teacher forced me to repeat the characters, so much so that I was able to write them without looking at them on dictation tests. So for example, my Mandarin teacher would say, 哦，我现在要去图书馆. And she would expect me to write that down immediately. That could be very difficult if you do not practice. So I would suggest for memorization, you need to repeat characters a lot, but you also need to know how to say them. Eventually, you need to get a point in your memorization where you not only memorize characters, but you need to start applying them. And when it comes to applications, there's one app that has really saved my life when it came to learning Mandarin, and I still use it today. I'm not sure if I can move over to the side to make room for it, but Pleiko, I believe that's how you say it. I know in Chinese it's called Pu Li Ke. Pleiko has been a lifesaver app. And the reason why is because you can Google different definitions of the words that you're trying to understand, and Pleiko is actually going to give you a pretty solid definition in English. Not only that, it's going to teach you how to use those definitions in a sentence. So, for example, a really good word to look up would be dianhua. Dianhua sounds kind of weird to the untrained Mandarin speaker, but dian in Chinese, it means electricity. Hua means talk. So once you start breaking down the characters in Chinese, you'll start understanding the meaning. And that's the beauty of the language. Every single character has its own meaning, and apps like Pleiko explain them very well. You could look up the individual character for dian and what it means individually, and you can also look up the character for hua and what it means individually. That's why I think that app is super cool, because it'll break down all of the characters in a ton of detail, and you'll be able to apply them when speaking sentences. Because the whole point of learning a language is not to have it memorized in your brain and not have it go anywhere. You need to use that knowledge in order to be able to communicate with people. And I think apps like Pleiko put them in example sentences, so that way you would be able to apply them when speaking to people. A good thing that I would do when I memorized Chinese characters would be to apply them in a sentence. So if I memorize the character dianhua, I could probably ask, 你的电话号码是什么? So I would come up with one sentence like that, and then I would try to come up with 5 more. Also, too, in Chinese, a thing I started realizing, and perhaps something you might realize yourself too, a lot of these characters, they tend to come in 2 characters always. Almost always, nouns tend to come in 2 character forms. So for example, dianhua is telephone, tu shu is library. So they would come in these 2 character phrases a lot. This is very common in Chinese. Many times nouns, they will come in 2, sometimes maybe a little bit more characters. For example, tomato in Chinese, at least the way I believe it is said in Taiwan, is 番茄. However, in Chinese and China, mainland China, they say it as 西红柿. So sometimes this 2 character rule can be expanded to 3 when it comes to nouns a lot of the times. And so the first character will mean something, and so will the second, in order to describe the combination together. I would also suggest getting a buddy who already knows Mandarin and connecting with people who already know the language. This is a big motivating factor for why I decided to learn Mandarin over other languages like French or German, specifically being in Southern California, because in Southern California, it's quite difficult to find people who know how to speak French or German. However, in Mandarin, the beauty of Mandarin is that Chinese people are everywhere. And I think that's really awesome when it comes to language, because it means that you can apply it very easily. So try going to a Chinese restaurant and then order your food in Chinese. Try practicing your Chinese, even if you make mistakes. People will always be appreciative that you're always going to practice. Personally, what I would do is that when I went to Israel in 2013, I met quite a few people from a different church in Taiwan, and I connected with them. And years later, when I started learning Mandarin seriously, I would text them in Chinese. That is a very good way of practicing your Mandarin. It will especially improve your reading comprehension. And a lot of times, they would send me words that I had no idea what they meant. But regardless of that, I would immediately search them up within Pleiko, and Pleiko would explain the meaning to me, and I would learn Chinese that way. So you learn not by strictly trying to memorize the word coming out of nowhere. I tried to memorize the word with the proper context of a message that I'm trying to decode from a pen pal who I messaged in Taiwan. So you need to find Chinese native speaker buddies like this. And you can even practice this with people who are also learning Mandarin. It serves to your benefit to go with the native speaker because their level of Mandarin is way higher than yours. As with many things in life, you need to find people who are better at it than you are. And you too will start picking up those skills and also start improving via osmosis. That is how it works when it comes to learning Mandarin. So to sum it up, you need to be very smart about your memorization. Memorize the 1,000 most common phrases used in Chinese, because that will get about a good portion of your Mandarin learning out the way. And if you memorize those 1,000 phrases, you'll already have the proficiency of a very low-level speaker. Another thing when it comes to application of Mandarin Chinese, you need to not only memorize it, but you need to memorize words from contexts in which the language is actually being spoken. So when it comes to memorizing words, you need to, not only memorize the word, but also be able to use it in sentences. Find ways to incorporate it into sentences. You want to get at a point where that way your thoughts can be able to be translated into sentences. That's how you could transition from memorization to application. Because the most important thing when it comes to learning Mandarin is application of the words that you have decided to learn. And finally, find people who are better at the language than you. Find people who already know how to speak Chinese with your friends and practice with them. Have them teach you words that they don't know. And a lot of times, just by having a conversation with them in Mandarin, you will find words that you do not know, at least in text. That was the beauty of it. See, in real conversation, there is also value in that too. However, you can't just quickly look up the word immediately. With text, though, you could. So that's what I would suggest when it comes to learning Mandarin. And that's how I was able to do it for 4 years in high school through Chinese 1, Chinese 2, 3, and then Chinese 4 AP. Yeah, I took the AP exam too. That was a hard exam, but I think it was worth it for learning Mandarin because I still use it to this day. People are always super intrigued when I'm able to speak to them. And I think that is such a real privilege and a real treat, especially for being someone who is not Chinese and takes the effort to connect with people in different cultures. So hopefully these tips have helped you in deciding to learn more Mandarin, coming from someone who initially did not know Mandarin as a native language and came to learn it as a foreign language. So in the meantime, I'm Josh, and I'll see you in the next video. And please be sure to boop the like button and to subscribe below. See ya.